Breaking tonight, Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido standing firm in his calls for more protests tomorrow, all to urge socialist dictator Nicolas Maduro out of power and hopefully to live in exile on some beach somewhere far, far away from Venezuela. The man the United States recognizes as the president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, now appears confident Maduro is losing the army of loyal cronies the dictator once counted on to stay in power. Watch.
I don't think there's anyone loyal to Nicolas left. In Venezuela, there's no one left loyal to the usurper. They remain loyal to its interests. The truth is that we must think about the future.
Speaking of that future, joining me right now from Venezuela, a freedom fighter and member of the National Assembly. He's considered one of the brightest stars in Venezuelan politics, Rafael Guzman. Bienvenido, señor.
Muchas gracias.
I understand that there are going to be more protests in the streets tomorrow. They're all over Venezuela. Do you think that they're going to be bigger than the protests we saw last Wednesday? Yo entiendo que va a haber más protestas en las calles mañana. ¿Piensas que van a ser más grandes que las de miércoles pasado?
Bueno, la emoción crece día a día.
The emotion is growing every day. Tomorrow we have a protest taking place. Our intention is to take the streets of Caracas and the main cities of Venezuela, something similar to what happened on February 23rd, but with a very clear message, which is the route, the paved way from the National Assembly, the end of the usurpation of power by Nicolas Maduro, recognized by the entire world as a dictator, and someone that has usurped the presidency of the republic, the constitution of a transitional government, and that we should have free elections in Venezuela. We should give that tool back to Venezuelans to decide our future. Tomorrow, we will be demanding, on the one hand, opening the humanitarian aid channel, and our call on the first law issued and passed by Juan Guaido, the amnesty law to pardon the military officials.
Do the people of Venezuela really think Maduro will leave? ¿Tú piensas que la gente de Venezuela crean que Maduro se va?
We are absolutely convinced that the momentum, the time for democracy is here. It has arrived. We are absolutely convinced that we can pave the way for our future, and that's why we're going to remain in the streets demanding this, because for the first time we have the true support of the international community, and this is very important. I want to say this. In 2013, elections were rigged, and presidential elections, and the international community was not very firm in that regard. Then we saw the protests of 2014, more than 200 people died, and then the international community was very timid in that regard. The victory at the National Assembly, strong victory in 2015, opened the eyes of the world in the case of Venezuela. And there we started to see how the government started to attack the will of the Venezuelan people. Today, this is unanimous around the world that Maduro is usurping the power in Venezuela, and they started to cut all those resources, the sanctions by United States, Europe, and Latin America, to freeze these assets so we can rebuild Venezuela.
Es por un poco de President Trump. I mean, ¿qué es la diferencia? What is the difference here? Does President Trump have anything to do with that? Hay diferencia, señor. Es en los Estados Unidos, en la policía de los Estados Unidos, in the policy of the United States, there's a difference. ¿Por qué?
There's a difference because the government of the United States took the decision to understand that and that's how they declared it in their sanctions, that the government, the regime that usurped the power in Venezuela is also a threat to the region. And in that regard, many crimes have been committed, financial crimes on U.S. soil with the resources of all Venezuelans. And that is also something that attacks the American system. And we see the result. These assets and accounts that have been frozen for those around the government, personal sanction. And of course now, we need to have these resources to rebuild Venezuela.
The sanctions, yeah. You know, I'm going to get to that in a second. Un momento en los sanciones, but first, let's talk a little bit about when you and I last spoke. You told me that under Chavez and Maduro, voter intimidation has really been rampant. Cuando tú y yo hablamos, tú me dijiste que la estrategia electoral de Chávez y Maduro era intimidar, ¿sí?, a los votantes. ¿Puedes explicar esto?
Sí. Fíjate,
yes. Look, since Chavez was in power, there was an abuse of that dominance, that position by the state in the elections. This has been systematic. Election by election, they take rights away from voters. The last election, because with very poor conditions for the National Assembly, it was an overwhelming majority and we won. Since then, the government thought, okay, we will not be able to count the votes again. And they started to manipulate, threat voters with the identity cards. You could see that at the polling stations or around the polling stations, they would take away their ID. They would walk them. They would walk the voter to the polling station. There was a campaign, a PR campaign, to understand that the vote would not be secret. So people were very scared. 48 hours before the election for governors in 2017, mobilized more than 500,000 voters from the polling station. Voters outside of Venezuela were not able to exercise the right to vote, and everyone saw this. From then on, the opposition agreed not to participate on these elections, and so we created parallelism. We won the National Assembly, and then Maduro created a constituent parallel National Assembly. Then we had the mayor's elections, and then the presidential elections in May of 2018, where the entire world saw that no one participated, and even the only opposition candidate at that election denounced the electoral fraud, and he withdrew his candidacy.
There's certainly a lot going on, and mañana es muy importante. Tomorrow is a big day. Muchas gracias, Rafael. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ustedes.
Thank you.
Yo rezo para la gente. Sí, la libertad.